So these measures come from essentially some austerity measures that they've been trying to impose for almost a year now. And the reason for that is that for a long time, Lebanon has been funded by Western donors, many in Europe particularly. And what they want them to do is impose austerity measures to try and sort the economy out so that they can actually succeed as an economy. And what they said to them was that they would only release new funds if they did impose these measures. Now, there's $11 billion at stake that could be opened up, and that's the money that Saad Hariri, the prime minister, is trying to get to try and change things. The problem is that for the Lebanese people at the moment, they have already endured austerity, and from their point of view, it's not working and they can't face anymore. Some of the things that he was trying to plan to do were to have more VAT, a higher VAT rate. Also, this WhatsApp tax on WhatsApp calls that was going to come in last week, which prompted these huge protests on Friday. Already, costs for the internet and phone calls are much higher in Lebanon than across the Middle East. And of course, that's a lifeline for many people day to day. So immediately, Saad Hariri said they wouldn't do that. So they're now trying to find other measures they can impose that aren't imposing austerity upon individual people. Some of the things that they also want to do is impose a tax on the banks. They want to try and revamp the electricity sector. This country has 3 hours of power cuts every day in the capital, up to 12 hours outside the capital. Really infrastructure that is crumbling. Again, that's something that these European and American donors have said that they must reform in order to get their hands on that money. So these are the kind of ideas they're putting forward, but there's still much dispute over what exactly they're going to be because, of course, it hasn't been presented yet. So what exactly they've agreed, we have yet to find out.
And how is this plan likely to go down with the demonstrators who've taken to the streets since Thursday?
So the problem now is this looks like it's going to be too little too late. The trouble here actually started several weeks ago. It wasn't just on Thursday when there was a slip in this historic dollar peg that has held here for over 20 years, which has to a certain extent shored up the Lebanese economy and the Lebanese currency in a way that really is quite artificial. That started to slip, and there were huge protests from oil importers and people who were saying that we can't survive if this dollar goes. And that was when this trouble began. Then when this new WhatsApp tax was introduced, as I said last week, that's when everything really kicked off and became quite violent on Friday. That's changed a little bit this weekend. But at this point, we've gone beyond economic concerns. Out on the streets, people aren't saying, oh, I want the economy to be better. They're saying, I want this corruption to end. I want a complete change to this political system. I want all of these leaders that we have to go in a completely new parliament. One of the problems is that almost all Lebanese politicians with any kind of experience are people who are linked historically to Lebanese politicians of the past. They all run in these dynasties. So it's very unlikely that that is going to happen without some kind of radical change, and people seem to be pushing for that now. We've got this deadline tomorrow night, and it's possible that putting forward these reforms and perhaps a few more resignations from the cabinet, we've seen a couple already, might quell the protests, but at the moment that's not looking that likely for a few reasons. Firstly, tomorrow a general strike has been called, which means that a lot of people aren't going to work. So when you might normally have had a bit of a slowdown in protests after the end of the weekend, that's not going to happen because everybody is still going to be out on the streets tomorrow waiting for this deadline in the evening. The second thing is that most protests in Lebanon historically have been sectarian based. So you will have different sects fighting each other, often different flags among these protests. These protests are so different because everyone is united in saying we are Lebanese. The only flags you're seeing flying everywhere are Lebanese flags, and each sect is actually attacking its own politicians, the politicians who have historically been patrons for that sector. That's an enormous change. So really, it doesn't look like what Saad Hariri is going to propose tomorrow is going to be enough, but we will have to wait and see before we know what he's actually going to say and whether any resignations are on the table, which may satisfy some protesters.